Welcome to another episode of Just One More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justonemorefix.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix. If you like us, you can support us on Patreon, and you should give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to have our GenCon Wrap Up. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Jason.
I'm Adam.
And I'm usually Dave from the Digital Soup Podcast.
A proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other podcasts
At GonnaGeek.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3,
2,
1.
Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. So as you heard, we survived Gen Con, and hopefully you did too.
Woo!
Right on. Had a great time there this year. We did lots of fun stuff. But before we get into that, I want to make one quick announcement is that we haven't scheduled our next set of indie RPG days, but that was because of Gen Con. We wanted to kind of make it through Gen Con and focus on that and the projects that we had going on there. So we will be scheduling those in the very near future, and we will let you guys know those dates as soon as we get them. But we should be hitting Terre Haute at Game again, and more than likely back in Mattoon at
The War Zone. The War Room? The War Zone.
Yeah, the War Zone.
There's a big
Yeah,
in
big
the picture.
explosion.
That's what I remember.
Mushroom cloud.
War and mushroom cloud.
Purple mushroom cloud too. Right on. So the first cool thing that we have to announce is we mentioned on our Twitter and on our Facebook group that if you're not following us on those two, you should hop on there and check those out because we make a lot of announcements there. We did 2 interviews at Gen Con this year. One which will be dropping very soon, which was with Stacy Delorfano from. Actually, man, I whipped that one out right
Contessa
fast.
Online. Yeah, I was just thinking.
Man. But we had a great time sitting down with Stacy, and that interview should be coming out at the latest next Wednesday. But there's been some confusion about what is happening with Contessa and their presence at Gen Con and kind of the direction that they're going. So I'm going to work on getting that one edited and produced, or not really edited. We don't really edit our interviews, more just clean up some verbal tics and whatnot. So that one should be coming out at the latest next Wednesday, and as soon as I have it done, I'm going to release it to sort of clarify, because we talked with Stacy quite a bit about a lot of things, really, but specifically about Contessa and its direction and what they're going to do next. So they're not shutting down, just to make sure everyone's clear. They are more or less shifting gears for what they want to do. But look to that. It was a great time sitting down with Stacy, had a great conversation, and yeah, I don't know, great time. Easy to talk to. It was about the easiest interview I think we've ever done.
Super approachable and friendly.
So, very cool. Very cool. So, along with that, we had another interview. We sat down with James Raggi and Jonathan Tweet, and they have some things in the works, and there's some announcements made on that interview as well. So, that one will probably be dropping at the end of the month or first part of September. But if you are a Patreon supporter, as soon as those are done, they are going straight to the Patreon right away, so that if you are a supporter, you can check those out. I know, it seems like we talked up Stacy's interview so much. Raggi and Jonathan Tweet are very easy to talk to as well. Yeah. So, but
I feel like a lot of people know who. I mean, obviously, a lot of people know who Jonathan Tweet are. Right. A lot of people know who James Raggi are as well, especially if they're listening to us.
Yeah, very true.
We did an interview with him before, and
right on. Yeah,
a lot of people should know who Stacy is too. He's been in the industry for a long time.
So, speaking of Contessa, you were there early Thursday morning.
Yes, I was. So, I signed up to run Bedlam Hall. I showed up with all of my maps, my Ouija board dress, completely ready to go. And I had 2 people that had signed up. So I was like, okay, if only 2 people show, I can probably, maybe find one other person to just be like, please, out of the love of your gamer heart, come play this game with us.
I think if you had to as well, you could probably make it work with 3.
Maybe.
With 2, I mean, it wouldn't maybe not work the best, but
I think it wouldn't be as fun.
It could create some interesting opportunities because I can tell you, when I ran my Lamentations game at HoosierCon, I had 1 player, and I thought, ooh, and I was like, why not? He's here. Let's do it.
But that's a different style of game.
I agree, but it created some interesting changes in what I was doing to where it was still workable, and he had a good time, and it was fun. So you never know, I suppose.
But I had 1 player show up.
Right.
And so I I didn't want to run a game with just one player. I didn't think it would work out well. That the particular system is designed for significant player interaction.
Right, and it's a strong PvP
other
element
players.
to it.
Yeah. So, and a lot of the moves involve directing someone else to do things and stealing bonuses and things like that.
Right.
So I wasn't able to run the game, but I did help just get tables set up and talk to some people that came up to the booth while other people were busy. So I'm just like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the schedule. Take a ribbon, tell your friends, whatever, that kind of thing. Just being, generally a friendly human.
So for those of you that don't know, I just broke my headphones right on. Strap this to the side of my nugget and we'll make it work.
So I will say, though, that the Contessa group, most of their games were incredibly full. They ran a ton of D&D Adventures League, and that is like the hotness this year. And unfortunately, my little independent RPG game couldn't compete with D&D and some of the Pathfinder games that were full. So that being said, it actually kind of leads into my other thing. I still want to run a con game, and with the independent publishers, it's kind of hard because people don't show up for events anyway. And when you're looking to suddenly try and fill some slots with people that are just walking up, you're going to have a lot easier time hooking them with things that they're familiar with.
Right.
And that's not usually the case with the indie press publishing kind of stuff. So I think probably next year I'll run my game at Games on Demand, because then you have a huge pool of people that are looking to play small press games. And that's why they show up at that booth and
try something new.
And they're willing to try something new. You get to read the elevator pitch right there. And their games are pretty consistently full. They have at least 2 or 3 players in every game, and some are completely full. I don't know, exactly how many games they never get off the ground, but I'm sure it's not a lot, because they lay out like 12 games every 2 hours and fill them up enough to play every single one of those. Now, usually
we did talk to them when we were there, and they said they had a lower attendance last year or this year than they did last year, but that's because they moved. And they are now at the Hyatt Regency. I think it's on the 3rd floor. And it's lots of fun to go check out and try games there. So if you don't know about Games on Demand, they're definitely worth a look. And if you're looking to try and get into some of the smaller press games, some independent games, some story games, however you want to say that, and you're struggling to get over that initial hump of how to do it and see it ran by someone who is familiar with the system and knows how to do it, it's a great place to do it, because that is what got me over the initial hump of Apocalypse World. And we played in Games on Demand there, and then once I had done it, I realized, this is how this is supposed to work. And it's really kind of more of a mental barrier than anything. It's really not that big of a deal to do it, but sometimes you have to be some people, myself included, have to be shown the way to do things. It's just how I process stuff. So they are definitely worth checking out if you have any interest in trying a new game and being surprised, and as well learning how to make Apocalypse World or a lot of these other like Fate style systems and story games work.
And pretty much every time I've sat down for a game, the GM or storyteller or whatever you want to call them that's running that game is what I would call an expert in that game.
Yes.
Like, they have just a solid understanding of the rules. And this year, the game we sat down to, we happened to be sitting down with one of the 2 creators of the game. And that's not necessarily unusual at the indie press area either.
Exactly.
At Games on Demand, because that's not, there's been another game last year where it was a similar thing. We sat down with the person who actually made this game. Like, it doesn't get much more legit than that.
And I can't remember, it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago we played Warren, and it wasn't even actually out yet.
Yeah.
I had seen a playtest version of it, but it wasn't published yet, and we played the Warren, which is a Watership Down style Powered by the Apocalypse game where you play rabbits, and it was wicked fun. We had an amazing time, and it was me, Lacey, Lee, and Carrie, and we had a great
Kurt.
time. Oh yeah, Kurt was there too. There was a full table of 6. I think it was just us. It was all 5 of us. So that's another thing that's fun to do, is if you go with your entire gaming group and you can manage to get into one whole game, you are already all familiar with each other, and it changes the table a little bit. I enjoy playing games with new people, but I also really like to sit down with a GM that we don't know and have our full gaming group there and see what we can do and have some fun.
Right.
So you mentioned Axon Punk, and we played that at Games on Demand this year.
I didn't actually mention the name of the game.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But the game that we played was Axon
There
Punk.
you go. And I had a good time. It was a cyberpunk game, and I was a little leery of it at first because I'm not a big cyberpunk fan. I think it's neat and interesting, but it just gets a little repetitive to me. But it was interesting because it's a newer take on it, I guess. It's not the same old Shadowrun in a lot of ways. There was a lot more contemporary social commentary.
And I like the community element that they added in there. That since sometimes in the cyberpunk thing, there's a lot more isolation and you kind of lose that. And it does a really good job of adding it as a feature. Right.
So Axon Punk it's its own system, so it doesn't use Fate or anything like that. And it was Colin Kyle, right? Yeah. So Colin Kyle is one of the game designers and writers, and he sat down with us and he ran it for us, and it was a lot of fun. It was a 2-hour session. The first half of the session, I was really kind of like, man, taking a long time to get going. I was kind of curious, but it was a lot of world building. So we built our little base of operations, and we talked about like where our characters stayed in their bedrooms and what their space looked like. And it was interesting because it sort of, especially for a con game, there was some. The characters were pre-generated, but they had like backgrounds to them, and it was interesting because then you get to sort of put your own twist on it and your own flavor by describing how they lived and what they did, and then that was incorporated into the game as well. So some of the actions that your character took, you used an EMP bomb, and it didn't affect all of your stuff because you described your character was like an engineer and you had like stuff in various stages of completion all over the place. So it was interesting. He did a great job running it, and it was a lot of fun. So. Do you have anything about it, or?
Well, the United Church of Tupac. I feel like enough said there. I mean,
right. So it's got a lot of very strong hip hop elements, and they are from the designers are from the Chicago area, and they have the Sugar Gamers are involved with them, and they did some of the play testing and help putting in the game together. And it was a lot of fun. It was great. I had a lot of fun in it. I'm a 90s kid, and a lot of, I'm kind of straddle the 80s, 90s era when I grew up. So I remember a lot of the early hip hop stuff, and it was, it was fun. I had a great time. So it's worth checking out if you're into cyberpunk things, or even if you're not and you like 90s culture. It's kind of interesting to see how they incorporate
there's a lot of fun
early hip hop.
Spillover.
Yeah. And how they sort of, he talked about how early music now, like when we look back, we look at music from the 50s and 60s and how that informs our society now, and how they do the same thing, but when they look back, it's the 90s. So it's how the 90s music and hip hop scene informs their contemporary time, which is a really cool take on it. And I thought it was a lot of fun. So it's worth checking out. Well, another thing that we did, another game we played, is we only had one pickup game. I had kind of hoped to intend to do a couple, but it just didn't sort of come together. I don't know where the time went for this Gen Con. It seemed to just absolutely fly by, but we ran one pickup game in the open gaming area, and I ran my Lamentations of the Flame Princess Worm scenario for Mike Walsh, who is a listener and followed us on Twitter and on Facebook and stuff. So I ran that there with you guys and him, and it was a lot of fun. I know it's the third time I think that you guys have sat through it, but it's coming along, and it's changed a little bit each time, and I'm sort of tweaking it. And I think
I'm the only one that's been there for 3 sessions.
Oh yeah, okay,
yeah.
So that's actually, I think I'm at the point now where I'm going to.
It's kind of hard, right? Because I'm like, I want to be involved in the game.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, I'm going to try and not make any major decisions about where we go. Like those decisions specifically, because I don't want to influence the direction too much.
Right. Yeah. And you want to kind of, since you know where the cool pieces are, the set pieces, or however you want to say that, you don't want to steer them to it, but you still want to play and be involved. So, but that is, been played 4 or 5 times now, and I think it's ready where I've started to put it together actually on paper, and that will be coming out within the next couple months, depending on how well it goes putting it together, because I'm also going to run it at some of our local stores here and put it together as a scenario, and then that will go up on the Patreon once it is like 80% done as a sort of a work in progress, and then once I complete it, we'll see where it goes from there. And so yeah, more things coming from our Patreon. That's one of our. Well, at the end of this, I think we're going to talk about some goals, and we've had a couple week break and talk about some things and sort of where we're headed with the podcast and stuff. So, right on. Lee and Carrie aren't here with us today because Carrie is back to work. School has started for her, so we thought we should mention for her and a couple of other of our gaming circle of people. They did a medical LARP that they said raved about and was really, really cool.
And so it was called Redefining Pi, and it used the Delta Green system. And they actually started off, I think, like at the convention center, and then there was a shuttle that went to the Indiana Medical History Museum, and their LARP took place inside the Medical History Museum and the outlying grounds with that sort of Cthulhu mythos, medical,
Right.
Insane asylum weirdness all looped together in there. So, and they said that there were props and like snacks, and it was all laid out super, super good.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they like raved about it.
So it was a little expensive to get in. I think it was around $40 or so, but it was absolutely worth it from what they said, that there were several facilitators to run the game, as well as some NPCs that they interacted with, lots of great props. Plus, you had the ambiance of actually being in the Medical History Museum. So there's all this creepy and weirdness of medical history around you. And if you don't know anything about medical history, it is about the creepiest and most awful version of history that you can find outside of just raw warfare. In a lot of ways, it's kind of creepier because it's more human, more personal. So, but I can't imagine great ambiance there, and there was a lot of really cool stuff there. So it is definitely worth checking out if they do something next year. So,
and it was sold out, which for a LARP is a big deal.
Right. I know they sound like they had a couple hiccups with their transportation because they had Uber bring people to their game site, but there were some hiccups there or whatever, which is bound to happen. But all things considered, for having a 50-person LARP off-site where you had to arrange transportation for everyone, sounds like it went off about as well as you can really get to go at a giant event like GenCon. So kudos to them.
Yeah.
So that was put on by what on the event page is Aaron LARP, and from when Carrie talked to them, she said that it was a sort of a mom, a son, I think, and a sibling that sort of all put it together and made it work, and it was their first LARP. So kudos to them for getting that off the ground and making it happen. It's a pretty big undertaking, and sounds like a huge success. So kudos to them. This year, we actually went to the Ennies instead of just looking at what they were on paper, and it was a fun and interesting experience. There's a lot of categories and a lot of people nominated and a lot of awards handed out, and it was an awesome time. It was interesting to see all the designers and artists there and stuff. So it's no surprise. Frostbitten and Mutilated by Zach Smith did really well. He won 4 Ennies for his Lamentations or OSR product, however you want to use it. And it's a great book. We have it here. We're actually a couple sessions deep into playing it, and it's been a great time. So it's definitely worth checking out. But OSR cleaned up again at the Ennies in a crazy way. They won 11 Ennie awards, I think 4 silver, 6 gold, and 1 judge's pick. So there are, even if you're not into the OSR movement and you play D&D or Pathfinder, it's definitely worth checking out some of these products because they will move seamlessly into your games because their mechanics are a little more streamlined, but they still use the same basic framework. So if you're looking to reinvigorate your game with something with a little more weirdness and a little stranger flavor, they are definitely worth checking out. So some of the ones that won this year are Frostbitten immediately, like I already mentioned. Hot Springs, it's is it Hot Springs Island?
Hot Springs Island, yeah.
And Fever Swamp and Midderlands all are OSR games that won. And the interesting thing about Hot Springs is that it comes with 2 books, huh?
It was Vihander.
Yeah, well, I was going to get to that.
Are we talking about that as OSR or not?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So yeah, but the interesting thing about Hot Springs Island is that it comes with 2 books similar to how Dracula Dossier does. So one of the books is a small, like novel-sized book, like a digest-sized book, and it's a player aid, so the players can go through it and look. And this is all the documentation that is out there about Hot Springs Island, which is a sort of disaster zone of treasure and adventure. And then there is the GM book that has all the awesome stuff inside it, that all the specifics of what's on the island and whatnot. And so it's very cool. I like the idea that games are producing things this way. It's a lot of fun, and I think it adds a certain level or a certain new element to the adventures because now your players can look through and there's all this awesomeness that the designers have created that they can see now and choose sort of where they want to go based on the information that they have instead of just randomly stumbling through a sandbox to see what they find. So along with those OSR things, we talked with Raji a little bit about some OSR stuff, and Zweihander won an award, and it is a newer version of, I think, 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy, and he sort of made it his own in the same way that BX and all that stuff in the OSR movement has gone on. And it's kind of interesting because we talked about what really OSR is and whether OSR is just games that draw from the original D&D game and like the basic advanced box or basic expert box, or whether that includes games like Zweihander, which are updating some older games and bringing them into the modern era that have been sort of left behind. Now, I realize Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition has just now came out, but from what I hear, Zweihander is a really great game, sort of grim and, perilous, actually, it's in the name.
And perilous.
In the same way that a lot of other OSR stuff is. So it's an interesting conversation and sort of debate of, OSR doesn't really have an identity, but it kind of does. So I don't know. Make of it what you want, I guess. So Harlem Unbound, outside of the OSR movement, Harlem Unbound was another winner there, and it was I think it won for best cover art, and it also won for best product.
So it won gold for best cover art, and also for scrolling best setting. And nope, there's another one. I know there's 3. Best writing.
Okay.
Yeah, best writing, best setting, and best cover art.
Right on. And it is a Gumshoe product, and big fans of the Gumshoe system. I think it's the way to go if you want to run investigative gaming. And it's a game about.
It's a Gumshoe product?
Yeah, it's a Gumshoe. It uses the Gumshoe system.
Oh, I thought it used the Trail of Cthulhu system.
That's Gumshoe.
I thought they were 2 different things.
No,
I thought the Gumshoe was like the single player thing, and it was different.
That's Gumshoe 1-to-1.
Oh, okay, well there you go then.
So, it's all good. Lots of Gumshoes. So it is a Gumshoe product, and it uses the Gumshoe system to tell stories in, I think it's 1940s Harlem, obviously, but in the sort of underground jazz scene and all that sort of stuff happening in the Harlem area. And it looks really, really cool. And I like the cover art for it is really good. It's got that sort of old 40s political cartoon. There's a certain style. I don't know what the style is called, but it's very iconic. And as soon as you see the cover, you're like, oh, that's what that is. Yes, I very clearly know. So it looks very cool, and it's super interesting, and definitely worth checking out.
And that was actually, even though it's a Gumshoe 1-to-1, it's not by the Pelgrane Press people. Mm-hmm. It's put out by Darker Hue Studios. Mm-hmm.
However, if you are familiar with Gumshoe 1-to-1,
Chris Spivey that did Harlem Unbound also worked on some of the material for Gumshoe 1-to-1.
Right. So one of the scenarios for Dex Raymond, I think is the character's name, it's the scenario that takes place in Washington, D.C. And it's a very, very interesting and well put together scenario for Gumshoe 1-to-1. So the Harlem Unbound is definitely worth checking out if you like Gumshoe stuff. So I realize I said 1940s, but it's actually 1920s. So it's Prohibition era, Roaring 20s, marijuana being bad and wicked, and jazz music and flappers. Flappers are 20s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. So it's a very, very cool era. Actually, it's in the same era as Babylon Berlin, which is an awesome show on Netflix. I just realized. So very cool. Anyway, sorry, just sort of realized that out of nowhere. Couple disappointments we had at the Ennies. So one of them was for Bluebeard's Bride.
And it was only nominated actually in one category.
Yeah.
But that category was best production value.
Yeah.
And the Delta Green reprint, I'm sure, is absolutely beautiful in this new edition.
Mm-hmm.
But Bluebeard's Bride is the most beautiful book I have ever seen in my entire role-playing life.
Yeah.
The cover art, the interior art, the quality of the book itself,
Mm-hmm.
like everything about it is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, it all fits so well together as one product, and it's just it's a great thing. But unfortunately, it is a fan voted award. So I know Bluebeard's Bride is sort of a smaller game and really a niche game, and it's really super interesting and fun and worth checking out. But I was kind of disappointed because whether you like the game or not, if you see the book, you're just blown away by it. It's one of those books that just is so starkly different from any other RPG out there, and the quality of the artwork and the production and the way it's all brought together, the art direction on it is great. It's just an amazing product. So I was very sad to see that they didn't get a nod. Not to throw shade at anybody else that won or anything, but it's an amazing book, and it's one of the prettiest things that we have on our shelf.
It did win an Indie Game Developer Network award,
Right.
though, so they kind of do a little bit more of the small press specifically
Right.
games. But the other thing, like just in general, while we're talking about the Innies and being fan-based voting, that I found very frustrating, because whenever I vote for something, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, I want the most actual data available in order to
Yeah.
make my decisions. And when it comes to things, especially like interior art, and they have like links and stuff for you to go to the pages for for these different products, but you don't always get to see what the product itself actually looks like, especially if you don't have a gaming store that's right close to you, or some of the products maybe haven't even been like actually out long enough to be on the shelves of your local gaming store. But when we were looking at like best interior art, some of them, all you can see is a picture of the cover art, maybe one picture on the inside, maybe, and that's it. So it's very difficult, I feel like, to make an informed decision. So, you know, sometimes depending on the category, you may end up with a lot of fan-based voting. And I was actually really, one of the coolest thing I saw was Zach had tweeted a picture of all of the art in his book in a little mini thing, so you could actually see, oh, hey, I'm up for best interior art. Here's the art. And I was like, wow, that's really cool.
Right.
Everyone should be doing that.
Probably right, because it would be nice to see what's actually there so you make a better decision. Because whether you like the game or not, if you're looking at just raw, you know, the artwork alone, you know, you may be surprised at what you might find. So all the endings happen. And we're there, and it's a great time, and lots of awards and clapping and awesomeness and great games. And even if there were lots of games that were there that were only nominated and didn't win, and they are still great games. So just because they didn't get a nod or anything doesn't mean they are not worth a look. We take the Ennies list and we always go look and see what's on there and what might interest us. It's a list of what we always go check out. So at the end of the Ennies, the final award is the best publisher, and
Silver Ennie for that category went to Chaosium Inc. And the gentleman that runs Chaosium Inc. owns, whatever. Mm-hmm. Both went up and gave, you know, a short little speech, and it was very well done.
Well, it was a very heartfelt speech, and it was very interesting because for those of you that don't know, Chaosium has been around for a long time. It's basically been D&D, Traveler, and Call of Cthulhu. Those were the three games that were out for the longest time. And Chaosium wasn't doing well for a long time. And from what I understand, they were on the verge of closing up, which would be a huge tragedy because Cthulhu and Lovecraft would not be where it is now if it weren't for Call of Cthulhu. They've brought a lot of publicity to that and deserve a lot of credit for what they've done. And so he stands up there and gives a great speech about how there are more people in the Ennie Awards ceremony in the room than there were at the first GenCon that he was at in 1970, whatever, 2 or whatever it was, and how gaming has grown, and it was this small niche thing where you got made fun of and bullied for, but now it's a mainstream thing, and they're making jokes about it on The Family Guy and on Simpsons, and how far things have come and how things have turned around for Chaosium, and they're on the up and up and making great stuff again. And not that they didn't make great stuff before, but they're doing well financially now and producing great content, and gives this great heartfelt speech. And I was really, you know, kind of moved by it. It was very cool to see, you know, because he was very passionate about it, and you can tell he loves the company that he owns and has worked for so long. And it was nice to see someone get rewarded for their hard work. And so he receives a Silver Ennie, gives this heartfelt speech, steps down, and then they give the Gold Ennie to Wizards of the Coast. And I don't have anything against Dungeons and Dragons. They've done great things. They get more people into role playing, which is more gamers is always better.
Pull a huge amount of people into the industry.
Yes, and lots and lots of great stuff that they do to sort of get people to take the first step right into role playing. But there was no one there to even receive the award, and I was really kind of left sort of deflated because here's this, you know, gentleman from Chaosium that steps up there and gives this really moving speech. And he steps down. You can really tell that it meant something for him to be in front of all of his peers and you know, sort of open his heart up and express his feelings. And no one was even there from Wizards of the Coast to accept an award. And I know they weren't nominated for anything, but if you are the largest person and leader in the industry in terms of volume of things that are out there, when some people say, I play role-playing games, they say, oh, you mean Dungeons and Dragons, right? I feel like that means that you should at least have someone there, even if it's the unlucky intern who doesn't get to go to the Friday night party right away. They have to go a little late. You should probably send someone there, you know?
Right.
And so they won. They made the announcement. They put up the logo for Wizards of the Coast, and then everyone looked around and waited a few minutes, because not everyone is there to accept the Ennie, because not everyone comes to GenCon, but Dungeons and Dragons is at GenCon, so you probably should send someone. So I was really a little bummed out by that, because I thought it was sort of, I don't know what the right word for it is, if it's disrespectful or what, but...
No, but you know what? What it felt like to me is this. Wizards of the Coast has always been about Dungeons and Dragons and nothing else, and marketing, and we're going to do what we're going to do regardless of what your opinion is. And it just reinforced that to me, that it said, guess what? we don't really care about you.
Right.
We're making our money. We're doing it over here. You go have your little awards.
Right. And I don't know. It really rubbed
I'm
me.
not like pulling any punches. That's what it felt like. It felt shitty.
I agree. It felt very crappy, but like, I don't know if I expected more or what, but I was really just kind of blown away that they
exactly what I expected, but
I thought they would send like the unlucky intern. I thought they would at least send somebody, it's like, hey, send Larry, the newest intern or whoever it is, hey, you pick one other person and you guys have to go sit at the innings. Okay. Whatever it is, but I felt like they should have at least been there. And I know granted, I haven't bought a Dungeons and Dragons product in a long time.
what kind of surprises me even more than that, honestly, is like in other industries, the major league baseball people are like scouting the minor leagues or the college players.
Exactly.
Like, don't you think they would at least show up and be like, hey, maybe we can get some FaceTime with the up and up people that are coming in so that we can make our stuff better? But then I guess, I don't know, they're so massive. They're just, people will submit their good stuff to us and we'll tell them to fix it and make it more like what we want. And then we'll publish it.
Yeah. So that was my other thought, is I thought, well, at least you could scout some new talent here, because I had that thought as well. But I will say this, I haven't bought a D&D product in a long time. And I had considered buying 5e because Isaiah is at that age now and he's into BX right now. And once he sort of gets that down, it may be time to move into something a little more complicated. But he could play whatever he wants, but I would choose to not support that, because I just think it's a crappy way to exist in the space. And I would choose to not support them with my dollars, essentially, and it's not that I'm not going to poo-poo on them and tell other people they shouldn't. You can do whatever you want. And if you like their games, that's great, but that's not what I'm going to do. So I don't know. That's my spiel. There you go. But I really was kind of bummed out. I was like, this is a chance for you to at least show up and be like, hey, we're here too. And you guys are making lots of stuff that's cool and isn't necessarily like in our vein, but that's cool too. And they didn't do that. So I was very bummed out and kind of frustrated. I don't know. Anyway, so enough of the negativity. That was a very small blurb of Gen Con, but I was just blown away by the impact of it, especially in contrast to the gentleman from Chaosium. I was just like, holy crap.
In the category of some of the media things, since you guys are listening to our podcast, you clearly enjoy podcasts. So if you don't know, the Silver Ennie for Best Podcast went to, I don't want to say it wrong because I always mix
Fear of a Black Dragon.
There's Fear and Black Dragon, and it's just the the filler words in between that I tend to switch around. So yes, okay, Fear of a Black Dragon won Silver Ennie for Best Podcast, and Miskatonic University Podcast won Gold. So there's that. And then as far as blogs go, no great surprise that Gnome Stew won Gold. Again, They have a hugely successful blog, and it's not just like one person that's writing a blog. Yeah. They have an entire cast of people, each of who is good at writing their own thing, working on their entire blog. So Sly Flourish won Silver Ennie for Best Blog.
Very cool. So check out all of those couple of blogs and a couple podcasts, as well as any of them that were nominated, because they are all very good. If they have enough support to get nominated, they're definitely worth a look at. All right, so enough about the Ennies. I don't want to make this a whole Ennie episode, but we had a great time at Gen Con and lost a lot of time. I don't know what happened this year. We didn't get as much done as we wanted to. Sort of time just slipped through our fingers, really, really fast.
I feel like we were only there for like 12 hours.
I know. It was crazy. It was pretty weird. What happened. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose. Before we get into our gaming picks, I thought we might mention a couple new places that we went as far as food that we had a good time at. So we went to Nada, which is a sort of a
more traditional kind of, well, I guess you could say
kind of a fusion of a couple things. They have like traditional Mexican food with other stuff as well, kind of mixed together. But the base of it is
for some of it,
Mexican
I don't know.
Food.
My enchiladas were super traditional and delicious, by the way. But they have an interesting mix of taco options. But it's not like your typical Mexican restaurant. It's very kind of upscale Mexican, I guess you could say.
And it's very nice. The atmosphere in there is very, it's very pretty. Very pretty restaurant. So, do we go anywhere else that we haven't been before?
The Claudia Irish Pub.
Oh, yeah. We haven't been there before.
Yeah.
Had fish and chips there. It was a giant fish and lots of chips. They were very good.
Yeah, they look delicious. And I had what is not actually a Reuben, I guess. It was, I believe it was called a patty patty melt of some kind.
Patio furniture.
But, it was basically a Reuben except with coleslaw instead of sauerkraut.
Right on.
People are more, I guess, open to the idea of coleslaw than sauerkraut.
Oh, those Chicago dogs.
Basically, the amount of dwell time that you give it is different.
Right on.
But it was really good, and they had their chips were pretty legit. And also, our waitress was in cosplay, and not just like I put on a fun hat or some ears. Like she was decked out as a Night's Watchman, cape, furry thing,
right?
Black corset and all.
Very
like,
cool.
Boom, done.
Yep, full on. Yeah, it was very cool. So, in addition to those two places, we went to
Mikado. Or Mikado.
Yeah, Mikado, as we always do. And it's great food there, as always.
Harry and Izzy's.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we went to Harry and Izzy's as well.
Their food is fantastic.
And their food is always good. And we melted Isaiah's face with some
shrimp cocktail. And
it was
he
great.
hung in there, though, like a champ. He even ate a second piece of shrimp.
Yep, and was putting some of the cocktail sauce on a cracker and eating it. And I was like, wow, look at you go, dude. Right on. So, yeah, lots of face melting. I had some as well, and I had more of the cocktail sauce than I normally would put on there, but my tolerance for wasabi and spicy food that I enjoy that is not pepper spicy has gone up. So I thought, why not? We'll go big, right? Go big or go home.
I like to go like more than just my face is red, but less than I can't breathe. Like right at the point where you can feel all the pores on your head. That's right where I like to like to dwell in that region.
Yeah, so I probably went a little further than I should have, and I did not feel the hairs on the top of my head. What I did feel was the screaming of my taste buds and my eyes watering. It was. I mean, it wasn't unbearable, but it definitely wasn't pleasant. But once you get over that initial hump of it, then it's sort of starts to trail off, and then it gets to the point where I actually enjoy it. So I think I can probably tolerate it a little more next time. But
Georgia Street Grind, we got some coffee from there.
Oh, yeah.
They're actually a local coffee shop, and the staff there takes turns actually going to the convention.
Right.
And it's just like this small little one-room place, but their coffee is spot on, and they were really friendly.
And they also weren't that busy, so
and it's one block.
Right.
It's one block in.
Quick, just one more fixed tip for those of you that go to GenCon. The double street is Georgia Street, and it's not the first block where they have the block party for GenCon. It's the next block up, and it's right next door to Hooters. And there's not much of a wait.
It's like an extra 20 feet for good coffee.
Yeah, and their coffee's good. So hooray, caffeine, which I need some now. Anyway.
And they're open till midnight.
There you go. Very cool. And they both attend the convention, so it's cool to support local coffee houses and local businesses, but it's also cool to support ones that are actually gamers.
Yeah, local geeks. Support local geeks.
Exactly. And I think it's just so funny to have a regular, like a business where you're like, okay, so I'm going to go to the convention on Thursday, and then you will work Friday, and then, trying to work your schedule out around GenCon. It was pretty funny to hear them kind of talking about the past couple of days about getting to the convention and still keeping the store open. So it's very cool. So we also went to Fogo, as we do every year, but this year we got invited, and we went and had dinner with Todd and had an amazing time with both him and his son Elwood, and we shared some gaming stories and had a great time, and were able to be involved in a tradition honoring one of the people that got him involved in gaming and inspired him and sort of mentored him in his game mastering. And I know that there are a lot of people out there doing that kind of thing, where they are remembering friends that have passed or moved away, or and circumstances have happened. And as gaming continues to grow and get older, I think there's going to be more and more of that. So I think it's really cool, because we talked to several people that say GenCon is a convention where they come back together to see old friends and meet people, while other smaller conventions are more about gaming. And just wanted to sort of mention that and tell everyone that, remembers their friends and pays tribute to them and keeps traditions going from the past to remember old friends and that kind of stuff. That is an awesome, awesome thing, and to keep doing it, and to thank Todd for making us part of that, because it was really awesome to be part of that. It was very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we had a great time at GenCon. I know we had kind of a couple downer moments in there, but we had an amazing time at GenCon, and overall, great experience again, as we have every year. So if you haven't been to GenCon, I would definitely tell you to go. It is overwhelming the first time, but make sure you try and make a trip. And I think now we're going to do our board game and RPG picks that we found this year that are our favorites.
Yes.
So do you just want to go back and forth?
Okay, sure.
So go ahead and start.
Okay, so number one board game for me this year, this Gen Con. I don't know if I should say year. That's
tough.
That's a long,
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a long time. Is Meeple Circus by Madagot Games. And I had actually seen this one online because I kind of, follow a few things here and there throughout the year. And I was like, oh, that looks fun. And we like stacking games anyway. What's the sailboat one?
Riff Raff.
Riff Raff. Everybody has a lot of fun with that one, but that one's a little bit tougher and
a lot tougher.
This has a lot of really cute little meeples, and you're putting on a circus, and there's like an app you download with music and everything, and you have to try and stack up your people to make circus acts. And so it's competitive, but you're stacking as an individual person. You're not trying to add on or take away from what someone else has done. And our kids, it's something they can easily figure out, even though, they may or may not have the dexterity to really like build the towers high, but they can figure out, oh, this configuration is worth this many points and actually get it together. And they were doing a good job with it. So we picked that up. Really awesome family game. We got the expansion too, because bears and lions. Oh my.
Lions, tigers, and bears. They are all actually in there.
And Madagot just, they make Room 25, which is an awesome game. And so that helped too. I was like, okay, well, you guys did a really good job on this, so let's try this one.
So my first pick is a really quick and easy one. It is no surprise that I'm a giant fan of Black Orchestra. It's a lot of fun and a great game. They put out a second edition, and they did an amazing thing in that they put a sort of expansion pack out that is to change your first edition game into the second edition game. So you don't have to buy a complete new game. Now, it won't change the board, but it will give you all the additions and the pieces and the new rule book to make it where it is the second edition game, basically. So not a lot of people do that, and I got it for I think $10 or $15, so it wasn't even terribly expensive. And I think it would be cool if other gaming companies did that. It was very cool to see that, because I was like, I want the second edition, but I don't want to buy a whole new one, and all that kind of stuff. So Black Orchestra second edition, check it out for sure. If you already have first edition, then you can look for this update. I think is what they call it. It was a Black Orchestra update pack. So check it out.
So my number 2 is everything at the Genius Games booth. I backed Cytosis on Kickstarter, so we already have that one, and I have all of the children's books that they've put out, because nonfiction children's books are sometimes very terrible. And so when I find ones that are appealing both visually and actually writing wise, I pick them up for our kids or my nieces or pretty much anybody that I can find to buy a book for, because I have a book problem. But so
no, we have a shelf problem. We don't have a book problem.
So they have books about women in chemistry, women in physics, and there's women in biology, I believe, is the other one. And then there are also even younger children's books that tell you what protons, electrons, and atoms are. And it has this very iconic art. And they're coming out with a new game that you could pre-order there, but I cannot remember the name of it.
Is it Ion?
No, Ion is the game
Peptide.
No, we bought Ion, Peptide, and Virulence because they're all smaller kind of card games that they put out that we didn't have yet.
It's a game about bonding and making molecules. Is what it is, essentially.
And it features cards with actual scientists on them, and some information about them. And all of their games are, first of all, they're fun and playable even if you don't like science.
Yeah.
So Cytosis is like a resource management game, and it is fun just as a gamer. And second, they actually put good details in there for you to learn something and enjoy it if you do like science.
One of the things I like about them the most, I think, is we played Ion, and it uses you have to combine molecules from the periodic table together to make
neutral compounds.
Yeah.
Basically.
But what I like about it is that even if you're not familiar with what, chloride or fluoride or any of these things are, it familiarizes you with the elemental table symbols, so like K and all that stuff, and so that I feel like once, like Isaiah would be getting to chemistry, he would already be familiar with seeing these things, and it makes them a lot less intimidating because he's like, oh, I've already seen sodium chloride. That's NaCl. And I like the idea how I feel like it can sort of break down some barriers that way to where you're already exposed to these things.
You get familiar with the jargon and the appearance of things.
Mm-hmm. And so it's not nearly as intimidating, and it's not a big deal when you see him like, oh, that's what that was. That's super cool. And then you can kind of connect those two things. And I feel like what makes learning, and specifically science learning, easier is when you can make those connections to where it makes the science more practical and more real life. And then you really learn it. Mm-hmm. And, so very cool. They make lots of awesome stuff. So my next one is the Einstein expansion. So Einstein is a tile placement game, and I'm not big on tile placement games, but I demoed the game last year because I was standing there and Lacey was checking out Cytosis, and they were like, hey, do you want to demo this game? And I looked down and I saw tile placement, and I was like, not really. But then there were 3 other people there and they needed a 4th, and I was like, sure, I'll be a sport. I'll play this game. And after the first turn, I was like, this game is really cool. So we bought it right there. And it's a great game. It's a lot of fun, but the expansion adds some new cards and some different ways to play the game. So it's you play different versions of Einstein throughout time, and you're trying to put compounds and ideas together to make theories, and you get points, and it's a lot of fun. So it's worth checking out.
And it's another one that's really informed by the history, too.
Yeah.
So all of the cards contain actual little factoids about
and
Einstein.
Theories, yeah. And that was from Artana Games.
Okay. Oh, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't remember if it was Arcana or Artana. So a game that we didn't pick up, but I would like to take a closer look at is called Root. And it is by Leader Games, and it's little forest creatures, but it's a game that has kind of some role-playing elements to it, and it's also got each character has a different approach to how they win the game, and so everything kind of works together to tell this more interesting story that's happening within the play of the game.
Right. So like the thing that I found interesting is the main box has 4 different armies, and that you...
Or not role playing. It's like miniatures gaming. It's an introduction to like mini wargaming, basically.
But the one of the armies is more about like a war gaming style thing where you build your armies and then move them across. And that's how you win. One of them is a resource management one where they're trying to accumulate certain resources, and then one was more of an insurgent style game where you're trying to spread out through everything. And then there's a 4th one that was something about like it was more like one character that kind of wandered around and caused trouble. So it was interesting to see how they kind of combined 4 different styles of game into one, so that if you have different people that like different things in different games, you could bring them together in one game. So I thought that was pretty cool. And there's an expansion for it that adds 2 more factions or something. So very cool. So my next one, my final one, my number 1 for this year would probably be Meeple Circus, but you already mentioned Meeple Circus, so I'll go ahead and mention Ice Cool 2. So we had Ice Cool 1, which is a lot of fun. It's a penguin flicking game, and it's lots of fun, but they put out a second version of it, and it's a self-contained game, but if you have the first one, then you can combine them together. Wonder Twin Powers activate, form of giant Ice Cool game, and it adds some new game versions of it where you can race around and chase each other, and it also adds 4 more penguins, so you can play from one, like not really one, but I guess from 2 to 8 players now instead of just the 4. And it's basically a very similar thing. They've added some new cards and some changes to some things, but essentially it's a very similar game, but the board layouts are different. And then when you combine the 2 together, it's like it's exponential. It's not like 1 + 1 is 2. It's like 1 + 1 is 4. So.
And there were a couple games we saw this year that had add-ons that allowed you to add 2 more players to the game, which I think there's a lot of 4-player games out there, and having a family of 5 that can be very frustrating.
Problems. So I agree. Very glad to see that. So I've got one honorable mention. It is for Heritage, which is a game by White Wolf in the Vampire the Masquerade line that is going to be a legacy board game about managing a vampire lineage throughout time is what it looks like. So I'm very excited to see that. I wasn't big on legacy games, and then I played Time Stories, and now I'm all about it. So it looks very cool, and I'm optimistic for it. So check that out on Kickstarter. I think it said November maybe is when it's supposed to come out. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you like vampire stuff.
My honorable mention goes to Everdell by Starling Games, and I guess I'm having a woodland creature theme today because it also involves woodland creatures, but it is very pretty. The base board of the game is, what do you call those things you put paint on?
Miniatures?
No. Like the...
Oh, a palette.
A palette. Okay, yeah. So the base of the game is like a painter's palette, and then there's an actual tree that stands up on the top. So it's kind of like this 3D board that you get, and just very pretty artwork to it. And it's resource management also, but there's not necessarily a finite number of resources. So you don't like, oh, you have the logs now, I can't get the logs. Right. So it works well for younger gamers because it's still competitive, but a little less cutthroat than some of your other resource management games to kind of get them into the feel of that.
Very cool. So I think we'll go on to RPGs now. So my first one is Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and it's a couple different products.
I'm shocked.
It is, there were 4 Gen Con exclusive adventures this year, so it was very cool to see something that came out only at Gen Con. It kind of sucks if you can't make it to the convention to get them, but if you can, it makes them that much more awesome. So I haven't checked them out yet, but there are 4 different adventures. Then they are very different in theme and tone. So I'm excited to check those out.
I didn't actually get this at Gen Con, but I feel like I need to mention it because I got it just before we went, and I probably would have picked it up at Gen Con anyway. And so that's the Pip System core book. I backed it on Kickstarter when it came out, and as it turns out, I'm a terrible human when it comes to owning digital files of things because I just want a book. And so I was like, okay, I need to get this book, and so I can actually hold it, touch it, flip through it, carry it around with me. I'm old school like that, I guess. And it actually... Eloy Lasanta, I probably said that wrong. Eloy Lasanta ended up winning a Judge's Choice Award at the Ennies. And he's the creator of the Pip System core book, as well as a ton of other things through Third Eye Studios. So I have that. That's going on my list, even though I picked it up like the week before Gen Con because it was on like Uber sale at my local game store.
Right on. My next one is DeGenesis Black Atlantic. So it's we haven't reviewed DeGenesis, which we will be very soon here. I realize it's kind of an oversight by us, but DeGenesis is an amazing game line that is by Marko Djurdjevic, and he is with Six More Vodka. It's a studio out in Germany, and they do production design and character design for video games and all kinds of stuff. And it expands the Genesis universe up into the UK area because the Genesis is really only takes place in Europe, Africa, and sort of Eastern Europe there. Most everything else has been destroyed by an asteroid apocalypse, essentially. So, but it is very cool. And the artwork for the Genesis is second to nothing. I mean, it is just unbelievably amazing. And what's really cool is the art is so very consistent. Almost all of it is done by Marko, but there's some things that aren't, and his art direction to keep the tone and theme and style similar is very, very good. And it's just an amazing game.
Okay, so I bought the Baby Bestiary Volume 2 by, I believe it's Metal Weave Studios, Metal Weave Games, something to that effect. The first volume was one of the 2016 Ennie Award winners for art.
Right.
So I bought the second edition. We already had the first one, and the kids really, really like it, and I really like it. And my plan is to use those 2 books as source material to run a baby creature care of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them sort of
very cool.
Inspired.
So I had
RPG for our kids.
When you were in the booth talking with one of the artists, I was standing there and someone was flipping through it and they had it open to the Sphinx Kitten page. And I saw it and the picture was really creepy because it was a baby's face with wings on like the lion body. And I was like, ooh, that's hard. That's awful. And it's great artwork, but it was just sort of strange, because you see these creatures, you don't think of them in those terms. And so I had sort of some wicked inspiration for some weird fantasy and lamentation style things. So I think
it'd be funny if you had a baby sphinx, but it's like, like trying to learn to do puzzles, like when your kids are trying to learn to tell a joke. Right. So like it's just like not funny and doesn't make sense. Right. But with puzzles and death.
That would be funny. That's awesome. I like that. I may have to steal that. Right on. So my honorable mention, because I don't want to finish on an honorable mention, is Hot Springs Island. So I already mentioned it before in the Annie section, and it's a great book. And we talked with the creator of Hot Springs, and it's just awesome. It's a really, really cool product. I downloaded it, or I got the PDF before we went to Gen Con and was checking it out there. But the book itself is definitely worth it. Even if you just get the player aid version, get that and give that to your players so that they can check it out and find what they want to go through. And then you don't necessarily have to buy the physical copy of the GM book, but it's definitely worth it because the production value on it is great as well. So Hot Springs Island is my honorable mention there.
Okay, so I picked up some, I guess, Powered by the Apocalypse novellas. Is that what they were calling them?
Ashcan games.
Ashcan games by Magpie. I picked up actually 3 of them, but the one I'm most excited about is Velvet Glove, and that is by Sarah Richardson, and she is one of the creators from Bluebeard's Bride and other awesome things. So in this one, you play like a 1970s girl gang, and not like in the cutesy sense, like in the gang, I'm going to do drugs, have sex, and cut you sense.
Right. So I asked something like Heather's, if you're familiar with the movie from the 80s, not the remake, but the original. And she said, no, even darker than that. And I was like, ooh, interesting, So
it's this, this little book. And so I'm about halfway through it and looking forward to kind of starting to run it. And the idea, I don't know if it's with all of these or with just this one specifically, is that it's almost like a play testing thing. Like you get this, you get to start it, work with it. You can send feedback or whatever, but basically a larger version of the game is in development.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So my last one shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody is V5. So Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition came out at GenCon, and I was super stoked to get it, and it was actually going to be my first stop as soon as the doors opened. But then Lacey made the point that clearly White Wolf has produced a ridiculous amount of books for this GenCon. You should go to the LTFP booth first and make sure you get the GenCon exclusives and what you want to get there. And I was like, okay, you're probably right. I did get a little too excited about vampires. But I got the book there at GenCon, and I started reading it. And I am in the very beginning session, in the very beginning section where it's more source material stuff. And it's done in the same style that all the other White Wolf books are done, where it's talking about stories. The first part of the book, no real spoilers or anything, but it's a letter written to a person who just became a vampire. And it's an interesting way to deliver some of the storyline behind Vampire without loads of exposition of text that you have to sort of suffer through. It makes it into a story, much more interesting. So the production value of it has been great so far. The mechanics we've already kind of played through a little bit with the alpha playtest and stuff and at Gen Con last year. And I am super reinvigorated with some Worlds of Darkness flavor and ready to jump in both feet as soon as I finish reading like 8,000 pages of material it's not quite that bad. I think it's like 300 or 400 or something. So it's a lot, but a lot of it you don't have to exactly read every word, because if no one takes these powers that you're going to have in your game, there's not really need to learn them outright. So it is a big game that I'm getting into. I realize, I'll eat my words, but it is Vampire and I can't help it. So what are you going to do?
Are there any like RPGs that haven't come out yet that are waiting release that you're looking forward to that you found out about at Gen Con?
Ooh, that I found out about at Gen Con?
Or you noticed people were plugging like Kickstarters for them at Gen Con, what have you.
So as this drops, I think it's the last day available for
Over the Edge?
Over the Edge. So it's the last day for Over the Edge on Kickstarter, I believe.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it is a surrealist RPG, and it's a new updated version of that. And we talked about that some in our interview and stuff, and it looks very, very interesting. There are a couple things that I'm not going to mention that I heard about at Gen Con because they are talked about in some of our interviews and stuff. So quick plug for those. So definitely check them out because there are some mentions of some things coming, because there are 2 projects that we talked about specifically in those interviews that I'm super excited to see and hopeful for when they come out. But as far as those 2, I don't know if there's anything else that I saw specifically at Gen Con that I was like, ooh.
So I know I've already tweeted about it and talked about it before, but the Demon City Kickstarter is still running. Zach won, I don't know, like 4 Silver Annie Awards this year. He won some.
No, he won a couple golds this year too. Oh, he didn't? They were all silvers? Oh, I thought they were some. Okay. Very good. Cool.
And several last year. Basically, the man has more awards than he has appendages, almost as many as a Hydra has heads.
Right.
So
we didn't mention it. It was my favorite part of the Ennies as Zach came walking down the stage was the clanking of the metals against his chest as he was walking, and then would sit down. It was just this rattle of metal. And
he
it was
one for bravado.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so basically there's a horror RPG and I backed it on Kickstarter, was like funding it for a little bit of time on Patreon, and there is there are just like an amazing set of stretch goals for it and a ton of writers who are experts like in their field and not just like RPG writers that are going to come to the table to work on specific sections of this horror. Kenneth Haidt is doing a section for it, as well as just a huge diverse group of people.
I really hope they meet the stretch goal for Zach to do a custom set of tarot cards for it, because that's the piece that I think I'm the most excited to see.
Basically, at this point, I'm selfishly plugging the Kickstarter in order for you guys to fund more stretch goals for me to get more stuff. That's really all this is about.
Right.
I think it's going to be a really awesome game. So I've seen, a lot of the art for it. I've seen some of the writing in the system already, and I think it's going to be really awesome.
Right on. So I had an amazing time at GenCon. Did you?
Yes.
I'm sure Lee and Carrie would say the same. We took our oldest, this is his 4th Gen Con. He was there for Saturday, Sunday. He's 12 this year. We also took our 2 youngest for the first time on Sunday, and they are 7 and 8. So if you have children and you're curious about taking them, we had a great time. Everyone there is very, very nice and polite, so you don't have problems with, I'm sure there are somewhere because...
I have to give a huge Gen Con nod to Motley Kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you have children, their gaming space is amazing. They have board games there. They have boffer fighting. They have arts and crafts. They have RPGs. They have a giant section full of cardboard boxes that you can stack and crawl through.
Minecraft.
Like if you have younger kids, look into Motley Kids. And then Gen Con's not the only convention that they go to either. No. They're also at Hoosier Con. I don't know if they're at any other conventions, but if you have small children, you go to local cons. It's definitely worth looking into to see if they're there.
Absolutely. So if you're curious whether or not you can do the convention with younger kids or whatever, you have to go at it knowing it's going to change things a little bit, but it's totally doable, and there are lots of things there to keep them occupied and lots of cool and awesome fun stuff for them to do, so it's definitely worth doing. So I had an amazing time at Gen Con. I'm sure you did as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I know Lee and Carrie had a great time, so I'm sure if you have thought about Gen Con, you should definitely do it. I'm sure that there are people that had some crappy experiences or whatever, because there's a ton of people there. So, when you get a lot of people together, there's going to be some hiccups and problems there. But I will say I have, nothing but good things to say about Gen Con, and we've had a great experience. And if you do have problems, I know the convention does a great job about addressing those things and kind of trying to solve problems and make things right. So it's definitely worth checking out. So I think that's our GenCon wrap up, I guess. So just a quick bit of podcast business, I guess, is that we have missed a couple weeks for a couple different reasons. Well, I want to talk about a few things because, we've been at this for quite a while now. We're coming up on 100 episodes, regular episodes. We're actually past 100 episodes. But if you look at our normal episodes, we're coming up on 100, and we're looking for ideas and some cool things to do for episode 100. So if you have any ideas of what we should do for episode 100, drop us a line and let us know on Facebook or on Twitter, or email me, James at Just One More Fix. And because we're trying to put something together fun to do, but we're not really quite sure what that should be. Also, we did miss 2 weeks.
Clearly, it should be an insane digital celebration where we run games for the greater Just One More Fix community online, and completely have to coordinate and drive ourselves insane doing something of that scale. Yes.
I think maybe we should put that together at the end of the year if we're going to do that when you are done with school. But we could totally make that happen. Have a Just One More Con.
How far out is it?
What, episode 100?
Yeah.
It's probably September, October-ish maybe.
Okay. We're only going to do one episode a month to make it.
Now, I think we can probably make that happen, but we should probably wait for December when you're done with school. I think we should probably do that, but...
Maybe we should do it for the 111th episode, like 111th.
111th
celebration.
Birthday.
Come on.
Right on. So we're looking to put something together. So if you guys have any ideas of what you would like to see, let us know. We're open to ideas, and we'll see what happens. But you may have also noticed that we missed 2 episodes. Life and Gen Con and Night Shift and evil, bad EMS gods have been not kind to me in the editing process here. So we aren't going away, but I think the short break that we had of those 2 weeks has sort of reinvigorated me to get back at it and have some new ideas. And it's also gave me time to sort of think about what I want to do with games I want to run. And I thought I've done this thing where I've spread pretty broadly in the games that I run. Not that I'm going to stop running all kinds of games, but I think I'm going to try and focus and specialize a little bit more for the next year maybe. So I think you guys may see some more focused content about some games that some listeners have asked us about, specifically V5 and specifically horror and techniques to use for horror. Also getting into Powered by the Apocalypse games and how to get over that hump of moving from a more traditional game into Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. And weird fantasy. I think we there's a lot of really cool stuff that's been put out there that to dive into, because we have done very, very little reviews. We've reviewed Lamentations as a game system, but none of their actual products.
We reviewed Chateau, Liqueur Chateau.
Did we? Okay.
Pretty sure.
No, we talked about it. We didn't actually do an official review of it. I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure. So,
man with the book that keeps track of things, I guess I believe you.
Along with that, more actual plays to come. We're getting our Night Witches back up and running. I've got 2 more episodes to put out for that and edit, and then we're going to get our next game scheduled because basically we don't record a ton of stuff and have a backlog. I like to keep things to where, well, I'm always working on it basically, but also to where things are coming out as we do them so that if we want to change things up, we're sort of flexible in what we can do. And then more reviews. More reviews, because we sort of got away from that, and there's a lot of games that we've played.
There's a butterfly. And
have not gotten to review. So those will be coming out too as well. And as always, we want to plug all the places you can find us. So that's our website, justformorefix.com. You can support us on Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search Just One More Fix, we're there. Our Twitter is at Just One More Fix. We have a Facebook group where we try to stay in communication with you guys and talk about games that we're doing at our own table as well as in the actual play and all the stupid stuff that we do. And where else can people find us? I think those are the 4 main places. We're on iTunes and all those places as well. So those are all linked on the main webpage of Just One More Fix. I'm trying to work out how to get it to appear the right way on your phone, but for some reason the links won't appear. So if you go to it on your desktop, they're all on the top banner. But phones are weird for some reason, and I'm having some trouble. So I don't know. I'm not a computer programmer. I know enough to be dangerous, basically. That's what I know how to do.
You're way more than me.
So
I know this button turns it on. Why is it not working like I want it to?
So just wanted to let you guys know that our sort of year kind of goes from Gen Con to Gen Con, and we're ready to get back at it, super invigorated and ready to have fun again and get back at this. It's been kind of a grind here for the last month or so, but as anything, you do anything, it has its ups and downs, but I'm reinvigorated. I think I just needed a little break, and we're ready to go.
And I'm done with school in 3 months.
True that. So
the second half of this gaming year, it's like the fiscal year, right?
Right.
The gaming year. It's going to be awesome.
Right on. So hopefully you guys had a good time at Gen Con. If you did, and there's anything that you want to specifically mention, I think I put a post up on our Facebook group where you can post in there about whatever you've seen or done or whatever it was, things that you saw at Gen Con and awesome experiences that you had there. You can drop them there in that on our Facebook or on that thread.
And you should post your Gen Con haul pictures on our Facebook.
Absolutely.
Or tag us on Twitter. Use the hashtag Gen Con haul and hashtag JOMF. And I will look for them because I want to see how much ridiculous stuff you guys picked up also.
Well, I'm also curious to see what you guys are actually playing as well, because I want to do things where our sort of gaming comes together and the things that we like and that you like, and also sort of direct our content that way. And also maybe find some new things that I don't know about that are awesome.
So yeah, show us your haul.
Right on. Very good. So I think that'll do it for this week. And as always, Gonna Geek plug. Haven't done this in a while, so quick Gonna Geek plug for Game Life Balance Australia, episode 64, the Nintendo 64 special. Awesome. For episode 64, we decided to honor the hollowed Nintendo 64 video game console from the late 1990s. Does the console still hold up today? Well, of course not. But the better question is, was it really ever that great to begin with? We sat down and played a dozen or so Nintendo 64 games before recording this, and we have thoughts, potentially controversial thoughts. So that is Game Life Balance Australia, episode 64, the Nintendo 64 special, and you can check them out on the Gonna Geek Network. So I am going to just say right now that I'm going to be very disappointed if they bash Nintendo 64 because it is awesome.
It is awesome.
It is awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Right on. So check them out on the Gonna Geek Network. And as always, you can find us on justonemorefix.com. You can support us at Patreon. And you can find us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix, iTunes, all those places. So hopefully you guys had a great Gen Con, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/justonmorefix or follow us on Twitter at justonmorefix.